Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cass, and hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. There's a little, I have a little switch. Yes, I am part-time starting my master's in at a university in Dublin, but currently I am hanging out on a little surprise sabbatical in Mexico. So there's a full range of spots and participation on our call. I'd like to take a moment here just to acknowledge where we are, what this land and who the people are that are on the land that most of you are connected around in Canada. So we acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful for this place to gather, learn, and reflect. We hope that the spirit of caring for the land and each other can lead us all towards reconciliation. Thank you very much. Amazing, Shyla. Thank you for that. I'm sorry that wasn't included. CFC wasn't included. Thank you for that note in the chat about CFC acknowledgement. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to start our conversation here to just sort of situate us with an understanding about corn and the thing about corn. There's a lot of Michael Pollan here because he wrote a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma that really outlined a lot of the issues and challenges and like grim realities that we have to deal with in terms of our relationship with corn. So look, there's so much to say, and I don't want to take too much of this time talking about this particular issue, but essentially, corn is an ingredient in nearly everything we eat, right? Whether it's mixed into beverages as artificial sweetener or as an additive in livestock feed, corn is the most ubiquitous vegetable on the planet. A chief culprit in the pervasiveness of this is the subsidy cycle created by lobbyists, organizations, and individuals that are paid to sway government to pass laws that favor corporate constituents over public health. And that piece is one of the most important bits, right? Favoring corporate constituents over public health. Lawmakers often make powerful decisions using research funded by agricultural companies and food corporations who have a vested interest in corn production. So this is a quote by Michael Pollan, who said very plainly, and this was like 2008, I think, our entire diet has been colonized by this one plant. And just to the right, you may not be able to read them all, but the point is the fact that there are, in fact, 134 different names for how corn shows up on packages, in our diets, on our plates, and in our bodies. Many in ways that we have no idea about. So this is just more of the story about the pervasiveness of corn. Next slide, please. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Okay, so to illustrate exactly how pervasive corn is, Michael Pollan gives us the example of the chicken nugget. So the nugget piles corn upon corn. Whatever chicken might be in that nugget contains and consists of corn because the chickens themselves are corn-fed, as does the modified corn starch that glues the thing together, the corn flour in the batter that coats it, and the corn oil in which it gets fried. Much less obviously, the leavenings and lecithin, the mono and di and triglycerides, the attractive golden coloring, and even the citric acid that keeps the nugget fresh can all be derived from corn. And obviously with lots of, this note can be overwhelming and frightening and make you want to sort of never leave the house. But it's important for us to just really connect to how deeply pervasive corn is in our diets, in our food system, and that'll sort of position us for hopefully a more encouraging conversation. Next slide, please. I really like this point that Michael Pollan makes about how gas stations are really corn stations, in the fact that there's corn in the gas, the ethanol for our cars outside, and corn in the food for all of us, high fructose corn syrup and all their friends inside, right? The snacks in the station are also deeply, deeply corn laden, right? And so the pervasiveness and how it has very quietly made its way through everything that we eat, much to the detriment of our bodies and the planet. Digesting these many different breakdowns and refinements of corn does not work for anybody's body, let alone the poor cows that have to deal with it. It's a massive story, but I just wanted to give you some piece to connect to this. And then to anchor us in school, next slide, please. We want to talk about school lunch. And the story on the average school lunch plate is really a story about corn, which is really a story about cheap feed for livestock, cheap sweeteners and thickeners for humans, monoculture farming, and corporate influence in the food system. So while it may look like you've got bread and chicken and salad and milk and potatoes and fruit on your tray, if you actually reduce those and really investigate where these bits have been grown and sourced, we really do have a tray full of corn. And I put a cob of corn where the utensils are because quite often we see corn-based plastic utensils also showing up on cafeterias, right? It's not just, sometimes the tray itself may be derived from corn. So it is everywhere. And this is the place that we really need to start considering the power and control over our food system and our access to food, because we have to work really hard to find ourselves heritage, proper, nutrient dense, heirloom, healthy for bodies corn. And there are also processes that need to happen to that corn to make it more digestible and better for our bodies to take in. And Chandra's going to give us a bit of information about that. But I wanted this intro piece to just really give us a sense of the magnitude of the issue. When I was working on university campuses, I was really excited about my more quiet, because I wasn't super public about all the plans because people would knock them down. But I wanted to see if I could get all the high fructose corn syrup off of the campus. And I was very happy with that little personal challenge. And just casually in the elevator one day, my boss told me that he had just signed another 7-year deal with Coke. And so it wasn't going anywhere. And everybody loves Coca-Cola Court in the athletic center, and all the other ways in which these corporate sponsorships show up and really control the food and the eating habits and patterns of students on the campus. So rethinking corn for me is one huge way that we can actually start resisting, because when we really think about it, and I felt like when I walked into any campus cafeteria, the message that you got there and the message that these plates send is about cheap, easy food and about corporate relationships and maintaining the relationships in corporate contracts. You have no sense of what season it is. You can't smell any delicious thing. It's all just a miscellaneous weird steam table. And so this is a point, because we are all connected to campuses and school and learning, to really to understand that the school lunch from K to PhD is a venue for this grand battle corn. Okay, so enough of the bad news. Now I'm gonna, with a lot of joy, hand this over to Chandra to situate us and to share some stories about corn in the Haudenosaunee tradition. Please, Chandra, thank you.
Wow, thank you, Joshna, for that amazing intro and introduction for me. I hope I can do that justice by following that. And I think it's really interesting that we've done it in this way, because Haudenosaunee protocols would have had us do it the other way, that I would have introduced things and then perhaps you would have gone. But I'm really liking this juxtaposition here. So what's going on? Don't say greetings, everyone. I first want to start by sharing a few words of an expression of greetings and love and thankfulness. I hope that each and every one of you are well and healthy and have peace in your minds tonight as we begin. isina ganun medyo sego yung kiat again has. I just want to also say a few words of greetings and respect to all of the things that are on the earth, in the sky, and on the other side of the sky that continue to do their duties so that we may enjoy our lives here on earth as human beings. Dahil oni the chido perlado na isang wayadizon dahil got sa year long. So I just like to acknowledge that for the Haudenosaunee, we say that there is someone who completed or finished our bodies, sometimes known as the creator, who is responsible for much of what we're talking about here tonight, and also that there's a strength of nature, a force that exists in all living things. So acknowledge all of those. And next, I would like to just offer a few words, not only of encouragement to the folks that are watching today, but following along in another Haudenosaunee protocol, to offer some words of sympathy, sometimes called some words of condolence. But the way I'm going to do that is in regards to what we're speaking about tonight, this food for thoughtful resistance. Why do we need to have thoughtful resistance when it comes to food on our university campuses? So I would just like to offer that there are many reasons today that we may be carrying some food-related grief and also food-related illnesses. So if that is the case for any of you, I acknowledge today that perhaps you are experiencing some grief when it comes to knowing about food. If you've ever asked yourself, what should I eat? Where should I eat today? Where will my food be coming from? If you've ever experienced any food insecurity, if you feel like you're having any food-related illnesses, and certainly for university age students and beyond, we often have issues that are related to food that play out in our bodies in terms of our body image. So I offer these words of sympathy to you so that you may see clearly, hear clearly, speak clearly, and think clearly, using a mind that is free from grief, so that we can hear each other today as we speak some words about food. And in particular, right now, I'm going to share some words about corn. So I thanked Joshna for that amazing introduction, because the corn that she talked about is not at all what I think of when I think of corn, especially in Haudenosaunee communities. That, unfortunately, is what corn has become and what is most known about corn. So while I appreciate Michael Pollan's book, what's unfortunate about books that come out in the mainstream is that they haven't quite done enough research into where corn really comes from, and corn as it exists in all of its wonderful goodness in Indigenous communities still today. So talk about resistance, the fact that we still have many varieties of heirloom corn in Haudenosaunee communities and Indigenous communities throughout this entire hemisphere already speaks to resistance and to the strength that exists within corn and within humans who plant it and take care of it and love it. If you really want to read a book that talks about corn, I might suggest this one. It's called Iroquois Corn in a Culture-Based Curriculum. And this is written by Carol Cornelius, incidentally. She's from Oneida territory out in Wisconsin. So there's one that I would put on the top of your reading list if you're really into corn. Now I'd like to share with you this slide here that hopefully you're all just anticipating. What is that? That looks amazing. What this is a pot of corn mush that I made. And this one in particular was made with a blue flint corn that was ground, and I added to it some wild blueberries and some pure maple syrup. I like this for several reasons, not just because of the yumminess that was in that pot that we got to eat, my family and I, but because to me, when I first look at this, it looks to me kind of cosmic. It looks otherworldly. It looks like some kind of scientific picture taken with a telescope from far out in the universe. And to me, that's absolutely appropriate for any conversation about corn in a Haudenosaunee context. because corn, as we know it, comes from Isina Galunhyadi, the other side of the blue, or the other side of the sky. And so that's why I love this picture most of all, because it's a reminder to me that that's where corn comes from. And so in Jijo Dasawan Jade, or the story of how the world began, the Haudenosaunee version of how the world began, corn is very present in that story, long before the woman known as Sky Woman even descends here to what will become known as Turtle Island, or here on our Mother the Earth. Jennifer, if you would maybe like to go to the next slide, please. So I just want to share with you very quickly before Josh and I get into some conversation, some conversations, is just a few slides that I have showing various forms of corn. So this here is some corn that we planted several years ago at our place at Six Nations of the Grand River. And it's just beautiful, but it also just reminds me that every year around harvest time, this is what our house looks like. It's just corn everywhere. The kids are just used to this by now, corn all over every surface, our tables and everything. And this is a white flint variety of, I guess you could say, heirloom corn. And just if you've not ever seen anything other than yellow corn on the cob, this might be striking to you. And it just never gets old for me how beautiful it is. You can see how long and straight some of the rows are. And we have a bowl there of the silk that we took off that we also use as a medicine. And we've prepared it this way on the table so that it would dry just a little bit. But then what we would do is take those husks that are on the end there, and we would moisten those and braid them so that you would have a really long braid of corn, and then we would hang that up to dry. And if you do that properly and put it in a good spot, then that will pretty much last forever as you keep it away from the critters. Next slide, please, Jennifer. So this one here, I just wanted to show you a couple of other versions or ways that corn can be seen. And so some of the ones that were on the table there is what you would see here. It's on my left, those long ears of white corn. And I'd also like to mention that in Ganyak Geha, or in the Mohawk language, for example, we don't really have a word for saying that we grow corn or that we grow anything. The way it's actually referred to is that food grows, yes, but that we as humans don't grow it. So we can say that corn grows. We can say that we do all the things we need to, like we sing to it and we dance for it and we plant it and we cultivate it, and we harvest it, we dry it, we braid it. We do all kinds of things with corn and all kinds of things with the agricultural foods, I guess you could say. But as humans, we don't necessarily cause it to grow. We work in conjunction with the forces of all of the things that are on the earth and in the sky and on the other side of the sky that work together with us. And we just kind of plant our seeds and we do a lot of things with them, but we kind of hope for the best that it will grow. But we aren't so arrogant as to think that we grow anything. The one in the middle, I love, and I just think that this should be the Haudenosaunee orange or something in the Crayola box, because what this is that corn there on the left, and this speaks to the process that Joshna was talking about. And in Mexico, they call that something a little bit different, and they often use a different product. But out here in Haudenosaunee country, we just say that we lye the corn, L-Y-E, and that is with a hardwood ash. So hardwood that is burned, and the ashes that are left would be sifted and put into boiling water. And then when you put that corn in there, it will turn this beautiful bright orange. So you go from that white corn there on the left, and you get this beautiful orange color in the middle. And that's because there's a chemical reaction, a process that is taking place as Joshna said, that will make that corn more digestible. It will make it more bioavailable, meaning that the nutrients that are in there will be more readily able to be taken up by your body. And it also just simply increases the nutrient content of things like calcium, for example. So once you do that process, you could then rinse that and cook it again until it is fully cooked and soft for something like on the right here. This is today what would look like a pretty traditional corn soup, and that is fully cooked corn, and that has some beans in there. So you start with that corn on the left, you do this process in the middle, and after a really long time, you would end up with that corn on the right. Next slide, please. Now, something else that you could do with this, and this is a kind of a specific Haudenosaunee product as far as I know. I don't know anybody else who makes this. This is ganado unwe, or this is a Haudenosaunee boiled cornbread. So the slides that we just looked at, you took that white corn, did that process in the middle, turned that bright orange, and then it rinsed it. And then instead of boiling it again to end up with the corn that you ended up on the end in the corn soup, you would grind it in that middle stage. And you would get this flour to which you could add boiling water, form these balls or these wheels. You could add things to it like beans or nuts or seeds or berries, and then put it back into boiling water. And then when it was done, this is what you would end up with, this boiled cornbread. And I haven't met any other folks who do this, but it's so familiar with other people who are corn minded. Because the only difference between this, for example, and a tamal is that there is no fat added to this in the cooking process. You would add that after if you like. Next slide, please. I think that might be the end. Okay, so we'll leave this one here for a minute. And I just wanted to show you this one because several years ago, I came up with this with some events that I had planned and a little organization that I put together called Kahwa Mwe. So this refers to our original foods. And I said, real people eat real food because there's that play on words, you often hear real people do this or real people do that. Well, ngwe humwe, or that ending of ngwe, is what we would refer to as something being real or original. And so for me, I said that real people, meaning ngwe humwe, eat real food. So in order to be this real, fully expressed human being, you should eat the foods that were designed for you to eat, the foods that come most closely related to our mother, the earth. And this graphic was done by my friend Jocelyn Antone, who, when I described to her what was in my brain, what I wanted to see, she did exactly that for me on the computer. And this is an arm with some traditional Haudenosaunee tattoo designs, and a fist, and rather than that fist being pumped in angst or in resistance, is holding a braid of corn. And so for me, I said that the revolution will be delicious because it is a revolution that we're talking about to get back to eating our original whole foods, but that it doesn't always have to be in something that is that has a negative connotation, but that something revolutionary that can be fun, and it can be building community, and it can also be delicious and fabulous. I think that was the last one. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this. I love the revolution will be delicious is something I keep dreaming about having on a series of aprons at some point.
Yeah, I did. Well, I had it on bags and mugs for a while, but
yeah, you did it.
But we'll get there.
I love it. And I think that this is exactly the angle that we need to focus on here, because these encouraging different choices or encouraging more eyes open and minds open about what food is available to us can often feel like sacrifice for people, and like they have to do more work, or like it's just deprivation, when really I believe firmly, and I feel like you share this idea, it is really about opening up. right? And opening up to way more flavor and joy and connection, which is, as you've suggested, kind of the way things are supposed to be anyway.
Yeah, so all of the stuff that you shared is absolutely true, and that story needs to be told about where corn is at today, and the fact that that is what most people think of is that yellow corn, that corn on the cob, which in and of itself is already kind of a hybrid, not a heck of a lot of nutrition, and what
Manipulation,
most people
yeah.
think of when you say corn. So even just to bring the awareness to folks that that is not original corn, first of all, and that's not the corn that is really nutritious, and it's not also not the corn that built societies for thousands of
Right.
years
Right.
and communities.
Oh, I love this. I love this. Thank you. We're going to lead into a session of just some questions and conversation between us, but
Okay.
you've offered a perfect segue. And one of the questions that I have that I'd like to pick up on is, how does this conversation about corn help us better understand and build community? Help us make that link. I love what you said there, please.
Ooh, wow. Well, I suppose there are any number of ways, really, but I'll offer a few that I can think of.
Thank
And I
you.
guess I'll actually start. Well, I know you have that question coming next, so maybe I'll wait. Well,
Jump in, do whatever you like.
okay, so I just know that in a Haudenosaunee context, corn builds community in many ways. So not just in old ways, in pre-contact ways, but even today, corn persists in all Haudenosaunee territories. And by nature, it brings people together. It is community in action simply by nature. So one thing, for example, about corn that's fun to know is that corn is wind pollinated. So even though we do like to offer thanks to our insect friends for pollinating many things and our bird friends, but wind is what pollinates corn. And the reason is because if you ever looked at a cornfield, corn likes friends. Corn likes to grow lots of it together. And so the more that you have of it while growing, the better, because it is wind pollinated. So corn by nature speaks to numbers and to community. But in communities today, people might have things like corn husking bees. So for example, if you have a field of corn that needs to be harvested, many people might show up, be harvesting corn all day long. In fact, one of the times that I fell in love with corn was probably, I don't know, close to 30 years ago, and out at Tuscarora Nation in New York side, the Rickards there used to have a husking bee and grew acres and acres of corn. They would invite anyone in the community to come to help them harvest that corn. But while doing that, people would be sitting around, visiting, talking, sharing old stories, pulling back those husks. Look at this one. Look at this one. This one's beautiful. This one's for seed, and Miss Norton Rickard's wife, Marlene, would be making like a moose stew and some corn soup, and it would just be food all day long. And it was just the best thing and the most brilliant way of bringing people together in community around corn. So corn needs a lot of work. It requires a lot, to be able to, and anytime that you see those cornfields growing now, making those unfortunate products that you talked about in the beginning, that's machines that go by and do that. But if you've ever driven down a highway and seen just nothing but corn for what seems like miles, think about that vast amount of corn used to be grown prior to European arrival here by indigenous people without using machinery or without using animals for that process either. That was all done by human hands, and a lot of them. So by nature, again, just the growing of corn and the harvesting of corn, it requires community in that sense, but it also just brings people together. And I dare say there's hardly a Haudenosaunee event that takes place across the territories that doesn't involve some form of corn, traditional corn.
Right. I love this because I feel like especially for the folks here with us, there's an opportunity for that community connection in pursuit, perhaps, of this better, more wholesome, more nutritious, more historical corn. Right?
Right.
Don't go trying to find this yourself. Find some pals, right?
Yeah.
And go out together to do this, to make community connections, farm connections, with folks who are intentionally working to save, preserve these other more, I suppose, heirloom. Is there another word, Chandra? Is there a better word for how we describe this non-manipulated corn? I've been saying
Well,
heirloom, heritage,
I would say
but I don't
gakwa
know if that's
unwe.
the right thing.
I would say gakwa unwe. That was the Ganyegeha word I
I
had.
love it. Okay.
I mean, in English, I don't know. We could just take any word that speaks to, um, you know, foods closer to the earth.
Nice.
Whole
Okay.
foods corn. I don't know. Take your pick.
I like that. The food's closer to the earth piece
Yeah.
is wonderful. That's really nice. Thank you for that. You've got me thinking now about
Hmm.
community and corn, because I mean, this is what I say about the kitchen, is
Hmm.
that it's a beautiful sort of intimacy and connection that happens when you're shucking peas or rolling dough or forming dumplings or whatever
Right.
beautiful thing it is, right? It's handwork.
Indeed.
And in the context of you all being together in a place, right. And there's the driving, you know how they say that you can have more intimate conversations when you're driving because you don't have to look at each other.
Uh,
Right.
mhm.
The kitchen offers that same visual distraction, I suppose, right? While
Yeah.
you're pleating dumplings or shucking corn or whatever it is, you
Mhm.
can really get down to it. And we find many generations also present for that, which is, I think, the venue for so much beautiful knowledge transmission, let's say.
Yes. And I'm
Okay.
aware that it's not
Please.
practical for everyone to spend 7 hours out of a day making a wheel of cornbread. However, it's really, I think, about just you talked about food literacy before, and just understanding where food comes from and just being mindful of that is part of the process. And so I like to say, as a human being, you're by nature, you're part of a food system. And
Right.
so you don't have to be a farmer, a grower, a harvester, even. Like I don't like this overlay that we put, this guilt we put on people, as if you aren't out there growing your own food, that
Mm,
somehow, you don't matter. By the fact that you breathe and you eat food, you matter. But it could be more about the responsibility that you have towards being a good eater.
nice.
You can
I
be a
like that. The
responsible
responsibility.
eater
Good.
without ever growing your own food, because it's just not fair to put on people, to say, like, not everybody's going to just jump up and go start planting and growing your own food. So as long as you're just responsible to the people who do that for you, then I think you're on the right track. Especially
Amazing.
students.
Yeah,
We're
totally.
speaking to students here. We can't expect students who have so many other things going on right now to say, okay, stop what you're doing and go grow your food. But we can teach
Feel some
people how
corn.
to
Yeah.
to think about it and how to be mindful of that.
I love this. I love that note too, because I think that there can be a lot of pressure to or people sort of telling themselves, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not hardcore enough in my resistance. I myself thought, should I get up there and start growing? When no, I think I
Yeah.
think I belong in the kitchen, and that's where my what I mean. That's where my talents are. So that's what I can bring to that process. But I
Mm-hmm.
like also what you said about the gratitude for the corn itself, because I think that one of the obvious pieces in this industrial spray of corn is a distinct lack of gratitude.
Mm.
Right? It is just there. It is generated with, I think you've accurately said, a lot of human arrogance,
Mm.
right? To manipulate and grow so that this thing is cheap. Really, and the only thing they're grateful for are the profits that pile up
Mm.
after bodies and earth and culture and tradition are all distorted and manipulated in that effort, right? It's a
Yeah.
distinct lack of gratitude, which is, I think, quite conspicuous.
Yes.
So leading from this, you have spoken a bit about the idea of feeding the good mind. And
Hmm.
I'd love for you to share a little bit about what that is with us, because I think that I think that it really is meaningful to students. I think it's meaningful to humans in general, but there's something about students and this moment in students' lives that I think could really benefit from this wisdom, please.
Sure. I'm going to tie this into a question um, that Cassandra just put in the chat about how students can actively engage in resistance, because I think we
Amazing.
need to make sure that we bring this talk around to that target demographic. And so I'll get there. So bear with me. I remember when I first went away to university, had just turned 18 years old. And I kind of fell in love with that idea of, being away and living on my campus. And the first time I went into the dining hall, I was an athlete, so I was there early, and I just was absolutely struck. I said, all I have to do is wave this little piece of plastic, and I get food anywhere I go, on campus. And I would say that newness wore off rather quickly, because I realized that there wasn't a heck of a lot being offered that I wanted to eat, but I know that there's a whole other complexity that goes along with that. But even at that age, I remember asking, like, why can't this be better? If we have this infrastructure, this system in place, that I can walk in here and you've got my meal plan on this card, and I can go in here like any time of day. I can go after practice, I can go anywhere, and
That's
I
it.
can get food. But why can't this food be better? And so I was just kind of started asking those questions, I guess, even at that young age. And so I did the best I could, because I was always kind of athletic and nutrition minded. But I remember that being really difficult. So in my words of sympathy that I offered in the beginning, I did that also speaking from experience, because I know what it's like to be out in the world trying to figure out what to eat. And sometimes that is dependent upon where I am, when there aren't too many choices that are coming out to me. Somebody's asking something else. There aren't too many choices that I feel are something that my body would benefit from.
Right.
So I think that that's one thing that we can do, and that students can do, is really begin to educate yourselves about where food comes from, foods that are closest from the earth, foods that are in the state of being closest to the earth. And there's a lot of talk about food system, global food system. And I think sometimes we do a disservice to young people when we jump to the conversation about global food system, because it's too much. It's literally too much for them to digest.
Right.
So if we
Right.
start the conversation with the food system that is the grocery store, which is what most young folks are going to be familiar with, then we start teaching about grocery store food system literacy, even if it's your local health food store, because even your local health food store is selling a whole lot of stuff that you might not want to be eating.
Yep.
So really, I think that it starts there for a young person, a university person, to, when you have the opportunity to make the choice, that you'll be more informed, to be able to make better choices. And I'm certain that there are folks out there that, not just in terms of what's healthy and what's not healthy, there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to be going into places, especially on campuses, and not seeing foods that are familiar to them, culturally even. And that's a whole other issue. But if we might as well talk about all of it. If we're going to talk about anything that's available, on a university campus. And when I go to my campus now, which isn't very often, but when I go to York, there's a lot of choice, but there's still not a whole lot of places that I would eat. So that is going to speak to some of the, the larger campus system in terms of what is allowed and not allowed on campus, which is all the more reason why you should educate yourself about foods that you want actually to put in your body. And what better time to do that when you're in university, when you're already there for your intellectual growth anyway. You
Yep.
might as well be learning how to be an adult human being when you're there. So it seems like an appropriate
Thank you
time.
for that.
Mhm.
I appreciate that, because so many times when I was running food service on campus in Toronto, I would have students be like, "Lady, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy. I got papers due. I got a job. I got things happening." Right.
Yeah.
And I would say to them, no, 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 no. Soon, like you cannot start too early here.
Mhm.
This is important now, because I really like to push back on this ridiculous sort of rite of passage that we have, where we somehow romanticize the idea that students should starve. Right? We are okay with students not having good nutrition because it's some sort of charming thing that they will go through on the promise that maybe the jobs that they will get after school will allow them to eat better food. When I think the entire notion is quite ridiculous. And if I had it my way, I think that our schools from K to PhD, because I feel like post-secondary students are often dismissed, unconsidered populations. This is the time where you need food that nourishes your mind and your body to allow you to absorb literally all of the learning and the lessons of this moment in your life when you have the chance to be in school and do this work. And so this idea of feeding the good mind this way really helps with the thoughtfulness, right? Because in the interest of feeding your good mind, wonderful students, there is now resistance, because we live in a world that is unfortunately not set up to do that, right? And
Indeed. And
the choices that you make, right, and the attitudes that you have will help. And that resistance the student resistance has proven to be the only thing that really shakes administrative thoughts. Let's
yes,
just
um,
that.
again, with those opening words of sympathy that I mentioned, that would be another thing to say, is that yes, you have inherited, young students, you have inherited a system that is broken.
Right.
And I'm in the middle of that, so I can't really say that I'm entirely responsible for it, but I am in the middle. I'm 51 years old, and I have a daughter at McGill right now, and who kind of calls me all the time to give me the food reports, because she's grown up with me talking about food all the time.
Right.
All my daughters have. And yeah, our young people need to hear that we are sorry that you've inherited this broken system, but some of us really are working pretty darn hard to try to get around that. But the best thing we can do in the meantime is educate ourselves about that, and make better choices until we can get the larger systemic problems tackled. So it's kind of really an issue of practicality. I
Mhm.
can't fix the whole system for you right now, but I can help you work around it. Is
That's
about the
it.
best thing that we can really say if we're being
Yep.
honest for
Mhm.
students now. And when I say feeding the good mind, I use that phrase because in Ganyak Geha, there's a word, gat ni gung, which is often translated to the good mind, but it's not a noun, first of all. So it's not a thing like you can hold it in your hand. Oh, I have a good mind. I possess this thing. It's really kind of a verb to begin with. So gatnigonghio is speaking to good mindedness. So someone who has good mindedness, is someone who you might maybe in English say is kind of like that moral uprightness. Someone who utilizes good thinking in decision making and processes. However, if you look now to all of science, you see things like psychoneuroimmunology, neurobiology. You're seeing all these things and all these connections that people are finally making in the medical and science fields that are drawing the connections between what goes on in your gut microbiome and what happens directly in your brain as a result.
Right.
So really, you're taking indigenous wisdom and just putting it into a modern large word. when you say something like psychoneuroimmunology, thinking about how food not only affects the gut, but how in turn that affects what happens in your mind. So if you want to do better in school, pay attention to what's going on in your belly.
Amazing. Thank you very much for this. I think one of the things I wanted to chat about was just to offer some advice or suggestions for our wonderful students about how they could get their hands on some of this corn. Being in Quebec or Ontario, where they likely are, how do you do this? What should we look for when looking for this better, more wholesome, more heritage, more nourishing versions of corn? What do you have any tips?
Well, for corn in particular, you know that a lot of the folks here, I think, are around Concordia. You're in Montreal, right? Okay.
I think so. Yes, Montreal and Toronto we've got here. Yes.
Okay. So, well, you're pretty close to the Haga territory of Kahnawake. I don't know in terms of what's happening on Concordia campus or on McGill campus in terms of any direct, food system shuttle to the Mohawk communities near there. But that is something that I guess you could look into, or you'd have to have some, if there are any Haudenosaunee students on either of those campuses, and that would possibly be something you'd be interested in. But a word of caution is that, there's going to need to be some exchange of something, something more than just, can I come and buy some corn off you?
Right. Okay.
Kind of
Okay.
thing.
Thank you. Okay.
So these corns that we're talking about here aren't just like, let me go to the corner store and buy a bag of corn. This is, it's kind of the same with stories. When folks say, what are your stories? Can we use your stories? Can we have your stories? Sometimes it's like it's teetering into the whole context and conversation around cultural appropriation, to
Totally.
just simply say, like,
yes.
Can I get some of your corn? That's like saying, can I have a piece of your soul?
Some of your precious tradition and wisdom. Yes.
Well, when you and when you talk about resistance, like what people have gone through to be able to say that we still have varieties of corn that exist in Haudenosaunee communities after things like 1600s and 1700s bioagricultural warfare, where villages and just acres and acres of corn and other foodstuffs were burned to the ground in attempted genocide. It's not, it's no small feat that traditional Haudenosaunee corn exists today. So relationships need to be established and nurtured, for these exchanges to take place.
Thank you. Thank you for this wisdom and this reminder, because I think that so much of new ideas about food systems and food thought really is just about don't buy from here, now buy from here. Right. And I go back to the great Raj Patel, who was always insisting that we are not going to shop our way out of this problem.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, having said that, okay, if you're in Toronto and you want to take a ride to Six Nations, you could take a ride to Six Nations, and on almost every convenience store,
yes, I've seen this myself.
Possibly could buy a bag of lied corn and a wheel of cornbread if you get there on the right day. Of course, that's available.
I love the mystery of that. That's
so, I mean, it can happen.
That is wonderful. Thank you very much for this. I am going to, we're going to switch gears in thinking. Thank you. And we see questions are piling up, so we're excited to get to those. But just in the interest of this wonderful corn conversation, and because we promised you some visuals on food, I am here because I am now in Mexico. And as Chandra said, there is a Mexican equivalent, and a parallel practice. Here in Mexico, they call it nixtamalization, which is where the kernels of the corn are boiled with an alkaline solution, similar to the lye that we see in the Haudenosaunee stories. And that, again, that boiling, it's again a very lengthy process, but that boiling enables the husk to peel off of the outside, which then makes more bioavailability of the nutrition. It actually blooms the nutrition itself, and it makes it a lot easier for our bodies to digest.
Yeah.
And this is a really important piece because, as Chandra has noted, even this notion of destruction of corn and corn growing, particularly traditional heritage practices, has come right across the whole continent. And if you hear stories about the plight of Mexican corn farmers, it is one of genocide, oppression, colonization. Like, it is a miserable story. So what I have been so delighted about here is that I live in a small town outside of Guadalajara, and we have a tortilleria around the corner, and they are doing nixtamal masa. So this is a hunk. You can just buy the masa, which is amazing. So they've done the grinding and they've made it into the paste, right? I can beautifully come home with this lovely, sweaty little paper bundle of fresh made tortillas, which is, every time I walk home with this under my arm, I think that I am so lucky and living in the most beautiful, wonderful place. But you can also use this beautiful stuff to form so many other things. Your sopes, your tostadas, your arepas, all of this. And the fact that they will sell it to you half a kilo at a time for really not a whole ton of money I mean, there's just so much importance. There's resistance in every taco that is eaten in this town. We are eating nixtamal tortillas. And to me, that just, it's super powerful, right? It is really, really exciting. And what I love is when I go into the tortilleria, of course, they sell you salsas. There's a giant molcajete where fresh salsas are being made. But of course, also, the tortilleria also is the place where you get your tostadas. The tortillas just get toasted, and then when all of this gets a bit old, dried out, yesterday's tortillas turn into today's chips, right? And there's this beautiful continuation. And then, of course, the next move is when the chips are a little dry, they become chilaquiles for breakfast the next morning. And that is like to see the full life cycle of these very precious tortillas. I find myself really working not to waste any of these, right? They're very affordable and very easily available, but to me, they are wildly special. And this is the venue because, like you've said so much, I really believe that the plate is the place where we can see, where we have an opportunity for resistance. Right. And that is a thing that it's really alive here. And to see it happen in this very small community neighborhood way, everybody here can afford these beautiful tortillas, right? And that is an important piece. Even the dude who sits outside our apartment complex, asking for money and offering prayers in return and blessings, which is very sweet. In the afternoons, we see him counting out a little bit of change for a little stack of tortillas for himself, right? And just there's a really clear notion that there is intentional community food security with its anchor in the tortilleria. You don't have to walk far here to find yourself a tortilleria, right? So that everybody stays fed. Right. And we won't even talk about all the other beautiful things and the glorious buttery avocados and the fresh, limes. Sorry, Canada. It is, I feel very, very, very luxurious and spoiled with all of it. But I have been really inspired to learn more here and to make deeper connections around indigeneity and this beautiful food. Right? Like you've said, this revolution will be wildly delicious. We do not have to sacrifice anything except for old habits that are not serving anybody well. Right. Okay. So I think we have hit the point. We're going to take a pause with so much gratitude to you, Chandra, for sharing all of this and helping with this bit of wisdom. I think we've all, got one or two marching orders to move forward with. But we're going to hand over to Eric Chevrier from Concordia, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what else is happening and how all you lovely students can get yourselves involved in some of this beautiful learning and thinking and action. So over to you, Eric, with gratitude. Thanks.
Oh, so sorry. I think there's a question in the chat for Chandra.
Oh, please. Yes.
Yeah, Emma McLaughlin asks, have you heard any Haudenosaunee stories about how corn has migrated north? And then I'll pass it over to Eric.
Yeah, I have, but I guess I'll answer by saying I think the more important story is how corn migrated south, meaning how did we get it from the sky world? So familiarize with yourself with that. And then, yeah, of course, there are some, but just a reminder that our creation story tells us corn came from before the beginning of time and has been with Haudenosaunee since the beginning of time. Yes, there might seem to be a conflict between maybe what the archaeologists tell us about the origin of corn in terms of thousands of years here or there, coming from a certain region and then getting to other regions. That may or may not be true, but that's not what really concerns us in terms of indigenous knowledge and wisdom around the foods that we've had since the beginning of time. However, if you want to check out that book that I told you by Carol Cornelius, I believe she addresses that in there. Also, if you want to check out the work of Tuscarora scholar Jane Mount Pleasant, is also another one of our most knowledgeable people about that. And if you really want to know more, I can find some more specific examples for you of that if you want to email me.
Before we jump over to Eric, there's actually been quite a few questions that have been asked in the chat, so I'm just going to go run them quick fire round by you guys.
Okay.
Nice. Okay.
So another one for Chandra. Right back at the beginning, we saw the corn silk, and you mentioned it a little bit, and so somebody was wondering, what is the corn silk used for, and how is it preserved?
So it's preserved just by when you're husking the corn, just taking that off and just as you would dry anything else, usually on a drying rack. And then just as long as you're storing it properly to keep it dry, just like any other herbal tea. And most notably, corn silk is known to be used for the adrenal system, so for kidneys and for urinary problems, possibly bedwetting things sometimes for children. But I know that there are some other more traditional medicinal uses, but those are the most common, I think, in herbology.
Very good. And there's a question for Joshna. I guess in relation to a question for Chandra as well about the difference between corn growing in arid hot soil versus corn grown in more forest gardens that we see in Canada, and what you guys both think the parallel between those would be and how it would affect the nixtamalization and the lying process.
Oh, this is an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question, but I do know that I've used many varieties of corn with both cal or limestone and with hardwood ash. Right. And either works well. I think in terms of a scientific process, I'm not sure if anyone has, gone so far as to make all of those comparisons, but I think the more practical thing to do is just to take the varieties of corn that you have and try both. So that's what I've done. And so sometimes for me, it's a matter of what is the product I want to end up with at the end that will then inform which process I want to use. So for example, if I want to make the cornbread the way that I've been taught to make it, then I will likely use hardwood ash. If I want to use the same corn and I want to end up with tortillas, I might choose to use limestone.
Right. That makes a lot of sense to me. And my experience here has been that the original corn used does not really impact the nixtamalization process. Perhaps maybe a little bit more boiling, but it's already a very lengthy boil. And so whatever diversity or variance I think can get processed pretty easily through that mega boil process. So it doesn't seem to be much of an issue here at all.
Yeah, and there was something about the soil qualities, like comparing dry, arid climates, perhaps, and then the climates up here. So again, I'm not certain what the question was, but there are different varieties of corn. So perhaps not all corn that originates in one place is going to grow well in another. However, this is a really interesting question that people in Haudenosaunee communities are talking about right now in light of climate change. What varieties of corn are going to do well in, you know, in what soils, and are we going to be using different kinds of corn in different kinds of soils? Will that work better? So that's something that people are strategizing around right now, and it just kind of remains to be seen.
Very good. Okay, I think that was all the questions that we had. Thanks so much, folks.
Awesome.
Okay, I
Amazing.
just want to add
Both
that
of you.
I hope we mention enough stuff for students, because I just remember how hard it was sometimes. And I love that you mentioned almost this glorification of being poor, Joshna, as if like that's some kind of rite of passage, I think you said.
Right.
And there's also a difference between having an abundance of food and a lack of nutrition.
Nice. Yes.
So there's all kinds of food available to people, especially on the
Totally.
campus. We're always giving away
The
free
campus,
food
exactly.
at that event. But is it the kind of food? So I think that, you know, sometimes peer pressure can go a long way. And I mean that in a good sense. Like if you're pressuring people to drink and do drugs, bad. If you're pressuring people to eat healthy food, maybe that's the club you want to join, you know, or maybe that's the club you want to start. You know,
That's it.
Like when we get together, we'll pool all our money together to buy something good to eat.
That's
You know?
it. I love
That
it.
kind
That's
of thing. Like,
exactly
what can
it.
you do practically? I can't tell you how to overnight fix the global food system, but I can tell you when you get together with your buddies, maybe some things that you want to think about.
Amazing. Thank you.